Kooti y'ensi yonna eragidde General Kaguta Museveni, Mutabaniwe, Anita Amongi ne group yonna nga President Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, Robert Bobi be bawawaabira mwalaba jjuuzi Norbert Mawunga agenda mu kooti y'ensi yonna ebigambo byali byononese nga ekintu kibalya ng'omuliro guyitiridde kaakati nno nga President Kyagulanyi bwe yawaayo omusango ogwo General Museveni ebyo bibi era njasotaba akatambi kano omanye biki ebiri mu kooti y'ensi yonna Icc essaawa yonna ogenda kulaba ku nsanyu bannayuganda nga bakyakyanca ne President Kyagulanyi Ssentamu nga alayira nga tugenda entebe ebintu birayika kiri mulaala so tulabe akatambi kano odize bulungi ensonga ogenda kumanya nti nno wamaggwe we twakubye weewo.
By Uganda's Minister of Justice, Mr. Norbert Mao, to meet with officials at the International Criminal Court, including Mr. Khan, who is the prosecutor, the chief prosecutor of the ICC. So many people are reading what was the purpose of this visit. I will give you my own views on the purpose of this visit. As we all know, General Museveni is under tremendous pressure from many fronts right now, particularly the ICC. As many of you recall, it was last summer when the ICC announced that it had received a complaint on behalf of victims of torture in Uganda. And that complaint was filed by the lawyer, Bruce Afran, on behalf of people who were attacked, tortured, or the relatives of those who were killed before, during, and after the election of 2021. And the allegation was that 26 officers were involved in these alleged crimes, including the dictator himself, General Museveni, and his son, General Muhoozi. By the type of coverage that the complaint garnered in major media, you could tell that this was very serious. And I think in previous conversations, I made the point that it would only get that type of coverage if a superpower like the United States was interested in the outcome of that complaint. And you can blame him for anything and everything. Being a dictator, being a corrupt thief, being a mass killer. General Museveni is guilty on all of that, but you can never accuse him of not being smart when it comes to media. He knows how to read media. And when he observed the type of coverage that that complaint received, including a front page in the New York Times, on Al Jazeera, on The Guardian, on the BBC, and other major media, he knew this case was very serious. So what might this visit by the Minister of Justice of Uganda be all about? My own view is that the dictator is looking for a deal, and is very good in looking for deals. There has been a precedent. This would not be the first time that is looking for a deal. There's a link that I shared with you, comrade, and I would like you to distribute this link to all the sisters and brothers. It is a link from an article from the Wall Street Journal from June 8, 2006. The headline of that article was, "For Global Court, Uganda Rebels Prove Tough Test." Now, the focus of the article was about the difficulty of trying to apprehend Joseph Kony and his associates for the alleged crimes they had committed. But the main points, the most useful information from that article was not in the lead. The lead is normally the beginning where they have the most critical stuff. So the lead was about the difficulty of getting coin, but the most damaging information was in the middle of the story. And here's what that damaging information was all about, and it was revealed. Number one, General Museveni had met with prosecutors at the ICC, including Moreno Ocampo at the time, who was the chief prosecutor. And he spoke about Joseph Kony and about how Uganda wanted Joseph Kony to be indicted. So he was delivering Joseph Kony on a silver plate to the ICC. But the other junior prosecutors were very shocked at the meeting between Ocampo and Museveni, because according to them, by that time, the ICJ, which is a separate court, sometimes people mix up the two. The ICJ is the International Court of Justice, sometimes called the World Court. It has been in the news recently, of course, because it took up the lawsuit by South Africa against the state of Israel for alleged genocide in Gaza. So that's a separate court. It's in The Hague as well. It handles disputes between nations. The ICC, which is also in The Hague, is in the International Criminal Court. It handles war crimes and crimes against humanity, criminal cases, and it issues indictments. So why were the junior prosecutors disappointed with Ocampo for meeting and posing with Museveni for a photo op? Because the previous year, the ICJ, the separate court, had already found Uganda liable for the war crimes committed by Uganda's troops in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the Congo had taken that same set of information from the ICJ, which had found Uganda liable. It took the same facts to the ICC and asked the ICC to investigate Uganda's military for the war crimes in the Congo. So obviously, using the same set of facts by which Uganda had already been found liable in the ICJ, the ICC most likely would have indicted General Museveni as commander-in-chief of the army, just like Omar Hassan al-Bashir was indicted in the Sudan. So according to that article in the Wall Street Journal, Museveni himself picked up the phone and called Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the UN, and asked him to interfere and block that criminal investigation. So Museveni was looking to cut a deal. And on that occasion, it looked like it may have worked because he was never indicted. But here's the deal. The cases do not disappear. It can only be suspended. So it means a superpower, and only the members of the Security Council, the permanent members, can block or suspend an ICC investigation. So most likely on that occasion, the United States suspended that criminal investigation that would have ended up with Museveni being indicted. But today in 2024, things are different. Relations between Uganda and the United States are no longer the same. Museveni is no longer on the good house of the United States. In fact, one might say he's in the doghouse of the United States. And that's why I think the coverage was so wide in the major media last summer when the complaint was brought by Uganda. So I think Museveni has a real fear, just like he had a real fear in 2006 and went and met with Ocampo to secure a deal, saying, oh, please leave me alone, go after coin. That was part one. And then part two, he picked up the phone and called Annan. And it's very interesting. The article says Kofi Annan told Museveni that I do not have the power to block a criminal investigation of the ICC. But Museveni knew who had the power, a permanent member of the Security Council. So he probably went to the United States, and that's why he was already a puppet of the United States, but he became an even bigger puppet to secure protection from the ICC. So now that the relations are not good, Museveni fears that this time the United States is not going to protect him. So what does Museveni have to offer as a deal? The only thing he has to offer is obviously he does not want to offer himself, right? Number one. Number two, most likely he does not want to offer his son also. And by offer, I mean surrender if indeed they're indicted and come to be tried. But there are the other 26 officers. And this is, I hope some of them are listening to our conversation today. Museveni most likely sent his Minister of Justice to offer some of these 26 officers. I cannot imagine that he would offer all of them because he still needs some of them to sustain his dictatorship in Uganda. But most likely he's identified the ones that he wants to tell the ICC if an indictment is returned based on the complaint filed by Bruce Afran on behalf of the victims of violence, torture, kidnapping, and killing last year. If an indictment is returned, Museveni most likely would be willing to arrest some of those officers and have them delivered to the ICC. And by arrest, I don't mean he has to put them in handcuffs. You know, by arrest, it just means that you will agree to have them come to the ICC in The Hague and to plead on those charges against them and to stand trial. That's the only deal Museveni has to offer. He has nothing else to offer to the ICC. And that can be the only purpose, in my own estimation, why the Minister of Justice traveled to meet with officials at the ICC. There can be no other reason. There can be no other reason because the charges, the allegations rather, in those complaints filed are very serious. If anybody forgot the New York Times coverage of that story, I strongly recommend that you go back and you read that story. Let me see if I can pull up the headline very quickly. Okay, here you go. Ugandan president and his son are accused of crimes against humanity. So please, if you put that on a Google search and you pull up the New York Times article, you will see. So let me just read maybe very quickly the first few paragraphs of that article to remind you of how serious it is. Testimonies sent to the International Criminal Court detail accusations of torture and abuse committed against hundreds of victims before and after the elections in 2021. A trove of testimonies from more than 200 people who accused senior Ugandan officials, including the president and his son, of torture, killings, and other crimes against humanity has been submitted to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, a lawyer for the complainant said on Tuesday. The filing is an effort to bring international scrutiny to what human rights observers have called a brutal government crackdown on opposition groups and activists in the East African nation in the months before and after the country's bloody 2021 elections. The briefing accuses 9 top Ugandan officials of abuses, including President Yoweri Museveni, who has ruled the country with an iron grip for almost 4 decades, and his son, General Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who has been maneuvering to succeed his father. A total of 26 officials are accused of aiding and abetting the incarceration and the systemic abuse of Ugandans particularly supporters of the musician turned opposition leader, Bobi Wine, who ran for president in 2021. So this is the beginning of that article. So as you see, it mentions 9 senior officials and a total of 26. So if I were in dictator Museveni's shoes, what would I do? I would send my Minister of Justice to meet with Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor, and other officials, and I would offer to deliver some of those, either some of the 9 senior officials, but at least some of the 26 officials who've been accused of being involved in these crimes. So that's my estimation. And I think to cap the issue of the ICC, that's the extent of my presentation. So that will leave us more time for discussion now. But before we move to discussion, I would like to quickly mention a few other items that are also very critical. The second item that is very critical and in our favor as fighters for change and transformation against tyranny is the documentary film, The People's President, which has been nominated, as you know, for an Oscar in the documentary films category. And the Oscar is going to be on March the 10th. And the dictator is very concerned about that as well, because the Oscar is watched by millions of viewers all over the world, particularly in the United States. So now, ordinary Americans who are very big into film, whether the film wins or not, it does not matter. Every film that is nominated, they speak a little bit about the film and they show clips from that film. So by being nominated, Ugandans who are fighting for transformation have already won just by being nominated alone. Because now a global audience, particularly in the United States, which without funding of the Ugandan dictatorship, Museveni will not survive. So now Americans are going to be seeing that and say, oh, no, 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 no. I did not know that my taxpayer money is going into this. And American elected representatives, including members of the Senate, members of the House of Representatives, they will be watching it and they know that their constituents will be watching it. So that will also change their attitude toward continuing to pump money to this tyrannical regime. That's another important item. The other important item is the oil pipeline. And I think we've discussed this before. The oil pipeline, ECOP, still needs $3 billion. And none of the Western banks are now willing to give him that money, particularly after the World Bank suspended new funding to Uganda last year in August. So the commercial banks read that, plus there's a lot of protests from the environmentalists. The ones that were still sitting on the fence, I think they dropped off the fence by saying, no, we are not going to be a part of this as well. And that applies to the insurance company as well. So now the dictator is trying to get the money from China. So our mission, of course, is going to be to continue putting protests and tweeting and discouraging China from giving him the $3 billion that he still needs. And we have a number of arguments in our favor. We'll tell China, how could you secure a $3 billion loan for somebody who might be indicted by the ICC for crimes against humanity? And China, if you want details about the crimes going on in Uganda, watch the Oscars on March 10. So we have a lot in our favor to work against China and put pressure against China about the loans. And then finally, and then this is my final point, and then let's have a conversation. The Allied Democratic Front, the ADF, that is another instrument of Museveni's foreign policy. You notice the ADF always attacks right after Museveni is under crisis. The last major attack that happened by the ADF came, number one, let me tell you the pressure was he was facing. He had signed into law the anti-LGBTQ bill. He signed it into law in Uganda. I believe that was sometime in May. And then soon after, in June, Uganda lost an estimated from anywhere 50 or 150, depending on whose number you take, to Al-Shabaab in Somalia. So he was under tremendous pressure. After that attack in Somalia, it was 3 weeks later that we had, in fact, less than 3 weeks, that we had the attack by the ADF. I've always maintained that ADF is a weapon that Museveni uses just like he used to use the LRA. If he had wanted to eliminate the LRA, he would have eliminated the LRA a long time in Uganda, but he did not want to do so because the atrocities, whether some were committed by the LRA, whether some were committed by Museveni's soldiers themselves and then disguised as LRA atrocities, it was useful for his propaganda because he could unleash violence against the people and he could ask for foreign assistance, financial and military. Now in 2024, he's using the ADF for the same type of strategy that he was using the LRA in the northern part of Uganda. So we need to put pressure on that. You know, I tweeted a few weeks ago before the non-aligned summit in Uganda and the G77. I said in my tweet, and you can go back and look at it, I said, I guarantee you that there will be no attack by the ADF during this conference. And I said, why is that? I said, because the commander-in-chief of the ADF, who is General Museveni, does not want to disrupt his own conference. So therefore, there will be no attack. And sure enough, there was no attack, you know? So that's representation. Let's have a conversation now, sister brothers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. Yes, Mr. Kato, you had a submission. Please unmute and let's have the conversation indeed. Thank you so much, Professor, for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My brother, my brother, I'll call you my brother. I'll leave
Yes,
the
of course.
title alone because I know where you come from and you're just my neighbor. But I just want to thank you so much for the insight. Sometimes we see these things and we just begin wondering, but you brought a wonderful insight. And you're rightly, you have rightly said so that right from the time I read Ugandan Fine Mess by Dr. Anything that happens in Uganda, I just know it's like there's nothing like ADF. There's nothing. It's just made up. Even the LRA thing,
Right.
It's just made up. But I wanted to ask, is he in fear? Because even he didn't show up that late Jenani Lumum's remembrance service.
Right.
And I thought, oh, he will be traveling to Addis Ababa to meet other head of states. And then he didn't turn up. Are these two things related with what is happening with ICC? Thank you.
Oh, definitely, without a doubt. Because the thing is, they could indict you and what they would seal it. They would not release a press release until they're ready to do so. You see? So that could be the case. It could be that he's already been indicted. And perhaps somebody made the Uganda government aware, and that could be the reason why Minister Mao went there, because they already know that he's already been indicted. And the indictment has not been announced to the world. They're not obligated to issue a press release immediately after indicting him. So he could have been indicted or he could be indicted. But if I were in his shoes, I would not be traveling freely. If I travel, I would travel to countries where I know there's a high level of confidence that they would not arrest me and deliver me to the ICC. There was a case of it was not a head of state. I think it was a minister of finance, and I forget, of one of the Southern African countries, who was under indictment. It had not been unsealed. When he traveled to another country, it was unsealed, and they had to arrest him. So there's a likelihood that he's very fearful to be traveling at this time. And also, let me add two other points. Because the ICJ took a very interested action on the matter of Israel, I believe that the ICC chief prosecutor also wants to do something significant. That was a significant decision by the ICJ. Some people were disappointed that they did not explicitly issue what would amount to an injunction, but the statements that they made against what Israel is doing in Gaza was strong enough that many people read that it amounts to an injunction. And in fact, there have been some countries who are already ending some of the military cooperation with the state of Israel as a result of the decision at the ICJ. And on that same decision again, as you know, Uganda's, the judge who is from Uganda, Judge Sebutinde, is the only one who voted against all of the measures. And of course, I also tweeted 13 days before that vote was announced, I tweeted that knowing how corrupt Museveni is, he is going to sell Uganda's vote to Israel or the United States. So I was the only person who was not surprised. I'm sure there are many people who are not surprised either, but I was also not surprised when the Ugandan on the International Court of Justice, a judge, was the only one who voted against all measures. Even the Israeli judge, the ad hoc judge, voted in favor of more aid for Gaza. The Ugandan voted against it. Why is that? In my own view, even though the judges are independent and they're paid by the United Nations, they're elected by the General Assembly and the Security Council, in my own view, Museveni, all he has to do to get her to vote the way that he wanted was to remind her that, by the way, you know you still have relatives in Uganda, right? If I'm in my shoes and somebody tells me something like that, what do you think I would do? Of course, I would vote the way he wanted. And why would Museveni want to vote that way? Because, number one, he gets a lot of military assistance and technology from Israel, number one. Number two, he thinks by voting that way, the United States will look at him favorably because he's under so much pressure from the United States right now.
Well,
thank you.
Yes, go on, Nabianda.
good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody that is tuning in to this. I can't start my video. I'll apologize.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, I'm not in a better place to start my video, but a few days ago we were trying to share ideas on the visit of Norbert Mao to the ICC,
Right.
because by chance or by an opportunity, somehow, somewhere, I happened to be part of the people that were contributing to the database of tortured, kidnapped, and Ugandans who have suffered the wrath of the militia here in Uganda, and with Dr. Nico somehow, somewhere. So
Right.
when Norbert Mao went to the ICC, of course, there is a very big concept that we at times do not want to confront, which is diplomatic hypocrisy or double standards of the diplomatic of the international community. And we had to ask ourselves a bigger question: what is Mao doing in the ICC? And the ICC is looking for Kony. And Mao is one of the people that have met Kony before, as he alleges, with former Minister Betty Vigombe, and others that were in peace talks. So if the ICC is serious with this entire notion of Kony and the LRA rebels in northern Uganda, why don't they start with interrogating Mao, because he has brought himself to the ICC? So that shows you the double standards of the ICC, and of course maybe how I might disagree with you, Professor Ali Madi. Whereas Norbert Mao was in bad faith in the ICC, because I guess the past ministers, justice ministers of Uganda, have not gotten an opportunity to be at the ICC of late. It's Mao alone, and at a time where Museveni is facing allegations of human rights violations and torture, war crimes in Uganda. But we should also appreciate the fact, don't you think that we should also appreciate the fact that Norbert Mao is the Justice Minister of Uganda, and Uganda is a party or is a part of the ICC? Whereby now this, of course, takes, of course, for me, it takes away some of the allegations that Mao is on mission to do away with, to find ways of negotiating Museveni out of this, negotiating a deal for Museveni out of this entire allegations, because by virtue of fact, Uganda being a part of the ICC, therefore the minister is privileged to have courtesy visits in The Hague. So for me, the big question is how independent? Because of course, if we go the other way, we cannot stop Mao from going to the ICC. He has that right by the virtue of fact that we are party to it. But how independent could the ICC be while investigating, while indicting, while trying, or while holding Museveni accountable for the allegations that we have brought? Because if Uganda is a party to the ICC and we see Mao in ICC, of course, it erects the biasness of us that are running to the ICC. Don't you think that, my question now, I've asked so far 3 questions, but this is the 3rd question. Don't you think that the visit of Norbert Mao could corrupt or could evoke, could erect the ghost of diplomatic hypocrisy, just to hold Museveni, the indictment whatsoever, on record, but nothing practical or physically?
I think you are. Can I respond now?
Yeah.
I think those images are meant to accomplish exactly what is accomplishing in some with some of our comrades. Those video images showing, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I know some of us know that some of the Ugandan officials deserve to be handcuffed immediately, but nobody's going to handcuff the Minister of Justice or any senior official. Even Museveni. When Museveni goes to these conferences, when he comes to the White House, imagine, he came to the White House during the US-Africa Summit and stood next to President Biden. And all of us are thinking this is a genocidal killer. Why is he coming to the White House? So if Museveni, who is a genocidal killer, can come all the way to the White House, why can't Mao go to the ICC? What is the ICC compared to the White House? The orders that the ICC carries out come from the United States. Museveni was not indicted, as I submitted earlier, because the United States blocked the criminal investigation, which Kofi Annan had said he does not have the power to block. So by Mao going to the ICC, and they made sure that they showed you the photographs, the video of him shaking hands and smiling with Khan. Of course, Khan is not going to be a mean person. If In fact, if Bobi Wine makes a request to go and meet with Khan, I doubt that they would refuse that request. In fact, that would be a much bigger thing than Mao going to the ICC. If Bobi Wine went, the media coverage would be big, but Bobi Wine does not need that PR relationship right now to go to the ICC and post to Khan. Bobi Wine is going to be at the Oscars on March the 10th, viewed by millions of people. You know how Americans love movies, right? It means even Joe Biden is going to be sitting down that evening watching the Oscars. And if he has already not seen the film, The People's President, after the Oscars, he's going to say, oh, somebody make sure you screen this film in the White House so I can see it. So Mao can go to the ICC every week if he wants, as far as I'm concerned. Mao does not have the power to block an indictment. Once they indict, only a superpower can interfere. And that is not normal Mao. He does not have that power. And Uganda does not have that power. We should not allow them to play propaganda on us. We should look at the facts. And what are the facts? The fact is that when the complaint was filed, it got front page coverage in the New York Times. The New York Times, if you study the New York Times carefully, it has a relation like this with the US government. So on a matter like that, it means the New York Times is reflecting the position of the United States government. And the United States position was that this guy deserves to be indicted by the ICC this time, and we are not going to block it. Otherwise, it would not be a major story. And then we have to read something else. The World Bank can only suspend lending to a country when the United States makes that decision, because the United States is the largest shareholder. That's number two. Number three, Uganda was only one of 3 African countries that were removed from AGOA, that agreement with the US government that allows preferential trade status, lower tariffs from exports coming from African countries. One of only 3 countries removed was Uganda. So all the signals are in our favor. In fact, that is why Mao is going to the ICC. He wants to see what deal he can cut. But he can't go there and say, oh, I'm here to try to block you from indicting Museveni. No, it doesn't work that way. First of all, it would be very unethical. He would be insulting the intelligence of the prosecutor. The prosecutor will say, listen, I'm a lawyer, and you are a lawyer. You know a lawyer cannot come to another lawyer and ask them to block a potential indictment in criminal investigation. So he can't do that. But what he can do as a lawyer is to cut a deal, to offer something in return. And in my estimation, the only thing he can offer is to give up some of those people who are implicated in the crime. The visit was primarily, the image we saw, the smiling, that was for public relations purpose. Mao is not going to come there and publicly say, I came here to offer a deal that we are going to give up some of those officers. He can't say that publicly. And the prosecutor cannot say that publicly. So they're talking about coin, or they're going to print more information and distribute it about coin. The ICC is not spending a minute searching for coin when there are so many other compelling issues. There's the ongoing crimes in Gaza, the crimes in Uganda, the crimes in Sudan, the crimes in Cameroon. Who really thinks that the ICC is going to waste 1 minute dealing with coin? Nobody even knows if coin is alive today. So when they mention coin, that's for the propaganda purposes. In the back room, when the doors are closed, that's when they deal with the serious issues. And right now, the most serious issue is the complaint of crimes against humanity, against General Museveni, against Muhoozi, and 26 other Ugandan officers.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that rebuttal.
Thank you.
Yes. Just oops, sorry. Sorry, I think my video is on. Yeah. Thank you very much for that answer. I think this issue of Kony is really more of a home ground spin. I think they're the ones trying to detract attention from the real issues.
Exactly.
And that's because it is a redundant issue and it keeps coming up in the home press. And absolutely, there is no value, strategic value or otherwise. And we really think they're just trying to play on our minds. I mean, Kony is long gone. He's not even heard of. Who is killing people now in Karamoja, in northern Uganda, in central Uganda, around the country? It is Museveni. He continues to abduct, he continues to torture and kill. So I think that is just a red herring that the regime is using. But I think I'll pick the next question. That would be Ronald. Ronald, please unmute and ask your question. Thank you. Ronald, you're unmuted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joe. I thank you, Professor Arimadi.
Thank you.
I apologize for the video. I'll not be able to switch it on.
Oh, that's okay.
Professor, actually, you have taught us about the geopolitics a little bit. And actually, this is actually, we wanted to learn more about it and to understand the kind of people we are trying to ask for aid or for assistance.
Right.
For sure, when I actually compare to what is happening in Israel and Ukraine,
right.
Ever since the war in Ukraine started, almost 2 years, coming to 2 years, and the war in Gaza, it is just like a few months ago. But the number of people, all the casualties,
right,
in Gaza, it surpasses those of Ukraine. But
yes.
when you look at how ICC came up so fast to indict Putin, and even some of the accusations were that he repatriated some of the children of Ukraine to Russia.
Right.
And you see that Benjamin Netanyahu, with a lot of children being killed in the Gaza Strip,
right,
nothing has taken place. Not even ICC has come out to start investigating. Then actually we have to know who is behind this. Because in Ukraine, the Americans have interest. The Western powers have interest. We must admit we are in an empire Americano, and that is America, which is trying to influence each and every sphere of this world.
Right.
So we must know that in Uganda as well, before Museveni is indicted, these people must actually first get another puppet to replace him in the region.
Right.
What is happening in Congo today, in Goma? A lot of people are being killed. If you have landed on an interview of Kagame, actually he recently admitted that the war in Congo is about mineral, and these minerals are just passing through Rwanda, but they are not talking about the destination of these minerals. These were his words. The destination, he mentioned them, Tel Aviv. We know Tel Aviv is in Israel.
Right.
He mentioned Brussels, that is Belgium. He mentioned Dubai and some other destinations. So we are actually in this region of East Africa where the war in Congo and the stereotyping has started in Congo that people are hating Banyarwanda and Ugandans because they see us as their destabilizer in their country.
Sorry,
but the real people are these ones. So I want actually to say that we should not put much hope in America and all this, whatever propaganda we are seeing that Mao is trying to go and influence anything. These people, they know exactly what they are doing. ICC, without America, it cannot work.
Absolutely.
Even when it tried to investigate war crimes in Afghanistan, America started sanctioning some of their officials and they backed off. So we should actually say that it is now upon us, not these people who are actually safe. They are looking for their interest, and until Museveni they get a replacement in the region, they will not indict him because they see him as their puppet, who they will have to use to get their interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor, can we take another question and then you wrap it up?
Okay.
Yes,
absolutely.
Mimi, please unmute and ask your question. Thank you. I'm unmuting you. You're unmuted, Mimi. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, comrade. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Professor, always for your lectures. And we just want to sit at your feet so that we can just listen and be educated.
Thank you.
And if you can really continue providing that, sacrificing that time for us.
Oh, no, it's not a sacrifice. I'm a part of the struggle, so.
Yeah, so we just thank you for that. So I do agree with you that it's about public relations. Because that photo showing that he's shaking hand with somebody, is very important, not only for the United States, but even for all these African countries and everyone that is, one thing I've learned with us Africans is we want people who are connected. We pull so close to those people who are connected somewhere. And just seeing that people can think of so many things, seeing that photo where he's, shaking a hand or thing, because remember his Mr. Mao is still a representation of Uganda, on behalf of the dictator. So for me, the other thing I'm also thinking, and maybe I'm wrong, but about connections, I think even if he has not gone to ICJ, but we remember that Miss Julia Sebutinde was elected. Somehow, I'm thinking he should have connected somewhere so that he can pull those strings for him to be able to talk to these people about those cases. I think somewhere behind, even if they don't show us, there's a connection somewhere why he's going there. So my question to you, is, what do we do? Because many times these things we see and we just let them slide and we just talk about them. How can we counter that? Because if we just let it just talk about it, oh no, this is all these arguments and discussions, what do we do on our side to counteract that? Thank you.
Okay.
Professor, please answer. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, so the first, I think the first one was mostly, comments actually about how the hypocrisy, not only of the ICC, but the global system. And I agree with him totally 100%. They moved very quickly when it came to the issue of Ukraine. The ICC issued an indictment of Russian President Vladimir Putin. And obviously we know that whatever alleged crimes committed by the Russian military and under the Putin as commander-in-chief, and not to diminish any crime, a crime involving death and destruction is always terrible for all the victims. But if we are to be honest, the crimes committed by Museveni 100 times worse than those crimes. Yet Museveni has not been indicted. He might have been indicted, but that was blocked, as I said earlier, in 2006. But there's a possibility that he could get indicted. So I don't disagree totally. I agree 100% with what the comment said in terms of the hypocrisy. But on the other hand, that same hypocrisy on an occasion like this can also help us. And what do I mean by that? The ICC knows that the whole world is watching, and the hypocrisy has been exposed by the lack of action on Gaza. Obviously, any rational person can tell that Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is guilty of war crimes and deserves to be indicted. But Netanyahu, as we also know, will not be indicted, not soon anyway. Down the line in the future, things may change. But right now, so long as the United States is making these public statements in support of the government of Israel, Netanyahu will not be indicted. On the other hand, this puts pressure on the ICC to do something, and that's not good for people like Museveni. Who is protecting Museveni now? In the past, the ICC knew that the US was protecting Museveni. But now the ICC can see what we all see, that the US has distanced itself from Museveni, which means he is now a legitimate target to be indicted by the ICC. It all boils down to hypocrisy. Unfortunately, I agree with the comrade. Yes, Netanyahu deserves to be indicted too, but Museveni is much more likely to be indicted than Netanyahu, and the United States would not protect Museveni. And that's because of the same hypocrisy. Regarding the question by the sister, what do we do? We have to have this type of conversation we're having right now. And we share the clips, or we make shorter clips and we share it, we distribute it widely, including to the ICC as well. We organize protests. We continue to protest on social media and in person. We tweet. We can outdo whatever publicity that the Ugandan government does, because the Ugandan government has been tainted. And after March 10, it's going to be even much more widely tainted after the Oscar ceremony, when information about that documentary is disseminated even much more widely. I would not be surprised if Khan, the chief prosecutor at the ICC, has already seen that documentary as well. He reads the global dynamics just the same way as we do. And if I were in his shoes and I take my job seriously, I'm thinking, okay, Netanyahu deserves to be indicted. But at the same time, I know that I cannot do that and keep my job. He would not, simply, he knows that, unfortunately, because the United States cuts the check. The largest check to the UN comes from the United States. And the ICC is a part of the United Nations, just like the ICJ is also a part of the United Nations. So the biggest thing that works in our favor as Ugandans who want change is the fact that relations are not good between the United States and Museveni's regime. Part of our job is to make sure that the relationship stays that way and in fact becomes even worse by presenting more information about the crimes being committed by Museveni Muhoozi, and the other officers in the Ugandan regime.
Thank you very much, Professor. I know we've overrun our user time for paying tribute to our fallen heroes. Shall we just take a minute silence and then we resume? Thank you.
Ndowooza mubiwulidde General Museveni watudde wocha wakaluba essaawa yonna yandikwatibwa anti ICC etambulira ku ntoliza mu America ate President Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert Bobi Wine naye ali mu America gyasimbye amakanda. Owulidde documentary Bobi Wine the People's President omulimu gweri mu kukola munene nnyo eri General Museveni kubanga eri mu kulabisa mu America okumulaga nti nno kyakola okubeera nga akozesa General Museveni okukola ebikolobero ku bannayuganda si kirungi. Kati mu America naye ali atudde matiitiri kubanga President Kyagulanyi amulabisizza mu bitundu byonna buli wamu amulabisizza kati naye awulira ensonyi okuswala nti nno nze nkolagana n'omutemu akola bikolobero bino byonna n'olwekyo tulinde results ezijja okuba ennungi very soon nga ziva mu ICC koti yensi yonna eri General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni twandiraba nga ebintu biteredde Uganda yaffe nedda okumulamu omutuufu ne tufuna omukulembeze omutuufu General Museveni n'atuviira. Oyinako owulidde nti bali beetaaga bebakozesa bebakangakanga kati tulina okulaba nga naffe tubawa entiisa Abamerika wadde baagala bakangakanga naffe okubalaga tetukyayagala bakangibwa twetaaga abantu bastandinga ku values z'amawanga gaabwe aye ne bayimirirawo okusobola okutereeza amawanga ago. Kale tweyanzizza ensonga mpanvuko naye ate nga zirimu ekinogezi zirimu okuyiga zirimu essuubi General Museveni essaawa yonna wandimulabanga bamukabye bino byasindikayo mawu naye alina okutya era ali mu bubadi ageza okulaba nga alaba mpiseewa okuyisaawo ensonga eno neme kufuna buzibu baleme kunkaba wadde asobola okuwaayo okukola diiru nawayo abasirikale be ye ne batamukwatako naye nga tulina kulemeza kulaba nti tutuuka ku kye twetaaga ate nga tujja kituukako singa tulemerako ne tugamba nti ekimala General Museveni omutemu bwe tubukooye n'abamuwagira n'abamutemberamu ensimbi tubakooye twongere okulabisa Abamerika abo wajja kutuuka bamuseseme. Kale byebyo mbagala nnyo Mukama Katonda nsaba abankuumire mwenna gye muli tujja kuba tuddamu okwogera ebigambo bw'anabakkiriza Ddunda Lugaba Namugereka Batayi mweraba.